The Peugeot or Peugeot, depending on where you're living, e208 is proof that electric cars aren't always mingers, because this one is bloody gorgeous looking. And yes, there's a jump over the petrol equivalent of the 208, which starts from about €21,500 in Ireland. The entry level e208, which is an Allure spec, is about 28 grand. But the GT line is about 32. And sure, there are bigger cars about to come onto the market, like the Cupra Born, and even the ID3, if you don't go near an options extra, well, they're bigger cars. And if it is coming down to looks, well, the e208 might be something that a buyer just wants over those other two cars. So the electric version of it get a blue line at the front, the Tiger Claw swipes down the front of the car, the side profile is still very, very nice and good looking. Upgraded alloy wheels, there's a bit of diamond cut, bit of graphite going on. Now, if you go for the upgraded ones, don't come crying to me if it's a little bit harsh over certain bumps, because this is the weight of the car, the suspension setup. It definitely gives a more of a sporty drive, but you'll pay for it in ride quality. The GT version also gets a different coloured roof, which on white is very evident. Same with the B-pillars, black, and just the tones against the mirror housing, the arches over the wheels. It all looks pretty good once there's a bit of contrast going on. The e208 is working off a 50 kilowatt hour battery that will get you a range of, well, I'm being brutally honest here, it's 4 degrees, hence the hat. I can't really feel them. And when it's fully charged on a Type 2 wall box at home, as I've been doing, that'll take you somewhere between 8 and 10 hours, you know, the usual. Although the slightly smaller battery means it's slightly quicker to charge. Anyway, you'll see a range of over 300 kilometres. As soon as you get going on a motorway, any sort of stretch, or cold days, I would say, I'm being over harsh on it slightly, but you might get 200 kilometres out of a charge, especially if you're doing motorways and especially if it's cold. That will improve during summer months, but I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. I can get to 50% range on this, and there's 98 kilometres left in the charge. CCS charging port is around here. The little bit that comes out, that's for your faster charging. I got chatting to someone in an e208 a few weeks ago who didn't know what that was for, because the dealer hadn't told them. This car though can take 100 kilowatt charging, which is a nice benefit as standard. Many others charge you extra for that, or you can't get it, but you can on this. So if you're doing motorway driving and you want to get one of these, you're going to rely on charging a lot, but at least if you're in a region where you can get access to fast chargers, and I don't mean 50 kilowatts by fast chargers ESP, I'm talking about 100 minimum. Ionity, stuff like that. It is more expensive. On the continent as well, you're probably going to get more of them. Then this car is usable for motorways, because you just pull in for 15 minutes and you're gone again, and you pull in another 200 kilometres and you get the vibe. Anyway, that's good. More claw marks down the back. If you get a lighter colour, again, more two-toneness going on here. Same with the boot spoiler. 311 litres is the boot, which, interestingly, is the exact same size as the petrol or diesel 208. So even though it's an EV, you don't lose out on that. That's good. There's no spare wheel. The boot is not exactly, I mean, look, it's nearly twice the width and size of a electric mini boot, right? But, like, you get one large suitcase in here. You'd get maybe 4 stacked up on top of each other, take out the parcel shelf. Smaller bags like you bring on a Ryanair. And then you've got a bag for your cables. There's nowhere else really to keep the cables, so they're staying here. And there's a big lip. It doesn't look like there's any grooves for, a shelf, but there is elasticated little holdy bits here. So 311. Here's where it gets complicated, folks, because if you have the driver's seat back, and there's not much the driver can do about it, they're their legs and they need to be able to drive. There is a bit of a cutout. Okay, fine, but it's very uncomfortable. I'd be trying to move this seat, and I'm not 6 foot, right? So just for context. So if you have a child back here, as I do, who's 3, there's a lot of that going on. And then your front passenger obviously can probably give you a bit more freedom into the back. But again, once you add child seats in here, it gets tight. And the shell back ones, the Isofix for smaller babies. Again, if you can adjust your passenger seat, you've only got one child, it'll be fine. There are anchor points, obviously, for Isofix back here. No armrest. Very few cars this standard do have it. They do give you 2 USB chargers in the back though. A lot of places don't. And it's quite dark in here. But the headlight is actually alright for the size of the car, you know, it's grand. And there's storage nets on the back. My knee feels like it's going to break. Greeted by the controversial steering wheel. I generally like it. It doesn't cause me any sleepless nights. Your cruise control stock is down here, and on the GT it's got radar guided, so it'll keep up and slow down and speed up with the traffic in front. It's not an augmented reality heads-up display, but there's like the display inside. The iCockpit is very, very good with the nav. I love the way that goes there. Although I call it heads-up display. Someone left a comment before to say, it's head-up display. How many heads do you have? Okay, YouTube comments. Okay. Unleash. Storage for water bottles. Gear shifters there as standard. Somewhere to stick phones. Another little shelf down here. USB-C and USB. And then all the shortcut buttons to all the things you'll want to need to control the car, including climate. You get heated seats on either side. Very, very hot. Very, very toasty. You can program the car to charge at particular times. Also, crucially, without apps, without any messing around, you can program the car to heat up in the morning just by setting it up. And you can do it by day, just tick it for across the week if you like, and when you get into your e208 in the mornings, it's really, really toasty. It does use a bit of range to do that. I'd easily say it'll probably knock 20 kilometers range off by the time you get into the car, and it's all toasty. But again, if you're just doing in and out around cities every day, not going to cause you an issue whatsoever. It's cocoony. By that I mean it's snug. These seats are very supportive, lovely big bolsters on them and all that, and you're sitting kind of low down, so it adds to the sporty feel of the car. And the materials are pretty good, you know, the way you can change the background lighting at night time is nice, and it feels kind of futuristic but doesn't alienate anybody because you've got shortcut buttons to your main functions of your tunes. As I said, the shortcuts are here for all the climate settings that you might want. Some brands make you feel like they've skimped back on materials to go electric. I don't get that impression here in the e208. It's just like the standard car. We've got 130 brake horsepower on tap. For this size of car, I think it's okay. Combined with an electric motor, obviously there's loads of torque, so you're never really wanting for a quick getaway from a set of lights, overtaking, or even just pushing on into country lane corners, of which this car really, you know, takes in its stride. And when you think back to the GTIs and things of old from the 80s and 90s from Peugeot, if they put 180 brake or even 200 into this, you'd have yourself a little hot EV hatch that would be very, very acceptable by today's standards. As I mentioned, the upgraded wheels do give you a little bit more sense of what's going on underneath the car, particularly if you're on harsh road conditions, potholes, things like that. You do feel it. The flat top and bottom steering wheel does give you, whether it's a sense of sportiness, I do think it goes beyond that though, because it really is a sharp car to steer. Any little small inputs on the steering wheel and you feel an instant kind of movement in the car. So very, very direct steering, very, very noisy indicator. Range this morning when I started was about 320. We're already at 250 kilometers. There's no way I've done 70 kilometers of driving. But as I mentioned, it is cold. It's creeping up to 5 degrees now, and that colder temperature just really does have an effect on EVs. And the fact that there's no heat pump on this, you're not getting to use any of that excess heat or energy or anything like that to heat up the cabin. So every input in terms of aircon, whether it's when you're driving or if you're preheating the car, is going to use some of that range. There is a sports mode, and if we clip into that, again there's a bit more urgency to the car. We're already at 120 kilometers an hour now, and it's reasonably quiet. There's a bit of noise over the pillars. I did find though, if it's anyway wet, damp, cold, that sport mode will spin the tires very, very easily if you're trying to get away from a set of lights quick smart. I think overall though, the standard equipment on the GT is pretty good. Half leather seats, better looking wheels, lights, interior, nav. Add that then to the faster 100 kilowatt charging that comes as standard on the car. That's not a bad package at all. And certainly out of all the EVs I've driven, particularly at this sort of budget, you don't necessarily feel the weight of the batteries, and it's quite an engaging, low on the road car to drive. If the connection between your phone and the entertainment system was a little bit better, maybe wireless CarPlay, things like that. That would definitely help. For the price though, if you're someone who spends a lot of time in cities, you're going to struggle to get this overall package with the looks and with the price, and it excels in that area. In terms of energy consumption, 17 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which actually, compared to something like the ID3, even though this is also cold, I think is quite acceptable. It's just because this has a smaller battery, you're not getting the same type of range out of it. But in terms of consumption, for this temperature, this kind of weather, 17 is pretty good actually. The fact that this car has blind spot really helps you changing lanes, because I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten how to drive since lockdowns. And as you can see here, like, it can keep up with the best of anything. So the only drawback in terms of using this car on a motorway is just how quickly you eat through that range. But if you've got access to multiple faster charging options, then I wouldn't be as concerned about it. The e208 is a really interesting place to get looking at if you want to go electric. It's reasonably afforded, very good looking, faster charging. The drawbacks are it's quite cramped inside depending on your needs. If you're a single guy, single girl, you go away with your mates sometimes, or you're a single parent, you got one kid, it'll just about do it. If you take away the need for kids and seats and their stuff in the boot, quite a usable car. It's a little bit harsh if you go for the GT one, but it does look the best. And yeah, some of the German offerings are now coming in to kind of cramp into the space of this one. Although again, in the GT spec, you can drop well below 30 to get into an electric e208 if you'd like to get into it. And the fancier things aren't as important to you. The range when cold and the range on motorways, they are the two things to really just make sure you can live with them if you do want to look at one of these, because the battery at 50 kilowatts, it's not the biggest by today's standards. Pretty little car though. Thanks very much for watching.